No worries. Well, hello, folks, and hello, everyone, to the recording. My name is Browne. I run a financial services practice, but my difference is I specialize in only working with small business owners and their families. Now, my background focus is specialized risk. So I take the view that whilst you can make the money, if you can't hold on to it, there's no point making it. So what I do is I come from a background of law and some interesting things there. And then I've got 25 years of just specializing in what's called personal risk. So when we look at what I do, I look at the risks to people, which is the owner, the family, and staff, and what have you. I don't look at the risk to things like your car insurance, your glass breakage. But the interesting point that I bring to the table is that personal risk is actually business risk. They link together. And it's through understanding that we can look at, well, what's a better way of looking at risk? And that's what I want to chat about today, and to probably give you a framework to say, oh, let's apply that framework to every single thing, and then you decide how to prioritize. So Dixie,
that's what we're going to be doing today. We are going to be digging out the hidden risks and the threats in your business. And as Drew just said, it's not just to the business. It's to the owner. It's to you as a person. It's to your family. It's to your loved ones and all of those who depend upon you and your business for their livelihood. So just a friendly reminder, if you can please type your questions into the chat box. We'll be doing 45 minutes of talking, but you do have the opportunity to ask us questions during the presentation as well. We'll then do some Q&A, and if we don't get to all the questions in the Q&A, Drew and I will undertake to record a separate recording and send that out to you if we don't cover all the questions. So our purpose today here is not to frighten the living daylights out of you. I think both Drew and Roger and myself could quite effectively do that, but that's not what we're all here about. We're here about business risks, but we want to go beyond the bushfires, the floods, and the cyclones, and the drought, and even the pandemics, which we all know about now.
That's right.
The reason I'm sharing this with you today, with that background, that I've invited Drew along, is because crises are inevitable. We know they're going to happen, and they come in many forms, not just those floods, fires, droughts, etc. And all of them can be fatal to your business. The other thing that's a universal truth is that they do your head in. And Drew's going to go into this a little bit later in brief with, the emotional cost. And the other thing that we know for certain is that they will continue to happen. Just before we started, we're just chatting with Roger, who's into IT security, cyber security, and it's just getting worse. It's not a question of when, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So me, I'm Bronwyn. I'm from Small Company, Big Business. I'm an author, speaker, mentor, owner, and I'm a very vocal small business advocate. Drew, would you like to just give us I know you've already given one intro, but just give us a little quick intro.
Well, I love to talk. Quick, I can't do, but I am Drew, and I'm from Sapiens Financial and also from Unusual Risks. Sapiens is our core business, and Unusual Risks is one of our subspecialties. So we love talking about risk. How's that all short?
And he knows a lot about it, believe me.
Ah.
So our idea here today is to help you, other businesses, prepare and then respond when risky things happen, when threats happen to your business. In fact, I wrote a book about it. It's called Small Company, Big Crisis, How to Prepare for, Respond to, and Recover from a Business Crisis. And my wonderful publisher, Dixie, has just returned from the Frankfurt Book Fair, and my book's been picked up in Vietnam. How exciting is that?
Yay. That's good.
So what we don't want to happen to you is for you to have to put out the old "sorry, we're closed" sign. We're going to cover 3 things today. First, we're going to have a very quick look at traditional risk management. This is the stuff that you will have been taught, you will have been to workshops, whatever. The next thing we're going to have a look at is what's wrong with that. We're not chucking the baby out with the bathwater, but there are some limitations. And the last thing we're going to look at is those novel risks. We're going to try and delve down and find those things in your business that you haven't thought about. So first up, traditional risk management. It's all about making informed decisions when we're faced with uncertainty. There's 1,000 different. Go onto Google risk management, and you'll get a squillion results. The first thing I just want to do quickly is clarify some terms. I'm probably preaching to the converted here in this room, but a threat is different to a risk. A threat is one of those, I usually, in my presentations, I use this little bomb up there in the sky to represent a threat that's hanging over you and your business. Risk is the likelihood that that bomb will go off and it will come down on your head. Now, just because there's a threat doesn't mean it's a risk to you. Now, I recently read a book on risk by General Stanley McChrystal, who was the commander of the Gulf US forces in the Gulf War. So he knows a little bit about risk. Now, he made a really good analogy that a shooter, a sniper, is a risk. But if I'm cruising around Emerald in an armoured tank and there's a sniper, there's no risk to me. So the threat's there, but I've got zero vulnerability. If you've got zero vulnerability and there's no threats, if you've got no threats, but you are vulnerable, again, zero risk. But unfortunately, life is not like that, as Drew said during our discussions. What did you say, Drew? Scar? What did you say about
from The Lion King, my favorite part where Scar picks up the mouse and says, life's not fair, and I think you're right, isn't it? Life isn't fair, but it's part of the circle of life, I suppose, to coin a phrase. So
we're never going to be in a situation where there's no threats. That doesn't happen. So all we can do is work on the vulnerability bit, and that's what we're on about. And it's actually a little bit like your human immune system. So there's all sorts of bugs and colds and COVIDs and everything out there. But if you eat well, you do your exercise, do all that stuff, you are lowering your vulnerability to being having a cold or a flu or whatever. So this is I'm not going to spend much time on this, but this is the traditional risk management matrix, which you will have all seen. Up in the left-hand corner, down the left are all of your identified risks. We then assign a chance of it happening. Now I've got rare in here for IT, loss of data or hacking. I think that's a bit outdated. I think I have to update this slide, Roger. However, if it did happen, it would have a major consequence.
Yeah.
Therefore, and the way that we can go about mitigating that is having some good IT maintenance and redundancy. And if you want to know all about that, just give Roger a call after this webinar. Then we have our risk matrix here. So in our slide, we said that a risk of a cyber event was rare, but the consequence is major. So therefore, we consider this a high risk. Now, Drew, when we were talking about this, you were talking about the grading of risks, and you mentioned that anything more than medium, in your opinion, is fatal.
Yes, I think there's so many myths that we need to manage, but the first thing we need to manage is our confidence as small business owners. So whatever attacks our confidence normally starts to decay. So it's very important to understand risk and threat and the two differences there. I work in a space where it's all about numbers. There is, I'm sad to say, no morality. It's all about what does the big data say. And as a result, we look at things from what's called a statistical perspective, which means we can show out of 10 what the various risks are. And if you look at the old-fashioned threat metrics, and I think Bronwyn and I have talked about how this is perhaps a little bit out of date because it was made for a corporation and not for a person. And sometimes it skews how we think about these types of things, and that's really important. So anything over medium needs a double look or a double check.
Yes, and that's a very that leads into our what's wrong with this traditional approach. And again, I stress we're not chucking the baby out with the bathwater. It's a very good tool, but it does have limitations. And the first one, as Drew said, is it's designed for businesses, not people.
Yeah.
So the first problem is that most people don't do it. It's a simple tool, but more and more and more, too many businesses just don't go anywhere near this stuff. Secondly, it can lull us into a false sense of security. So, we've done our risk matrix, we have a little meeting at the office, and we've come up with our threats. And we've even put in some mitigation strategies. So we're right, we're good, done. Yeah, all over, we've dealt with that. So it lulls us into this bit of a false sense of security.
Yes.
Second one is the ultimate challenge of this traditional approach. Is the list complete? Have we got everything on it? And this is where we're going. First problem with that is we're all optimists. Psychologists know this. We're all optimists. And as us as small business owners, we're particularly optimistic. There's no way in the world we'd all be in business if we weren't.
That's right. We'll be out finding a job.
As Drew, what was that that term you had, Drew?
Yeah, I've got some notes here. I think it's fair to say that small business owners have a overactive positivity gene.
Yeah, that's the one.
And we have to, because if you really knew what was out there, you'd assume the fetal position and you'd be thinking about, where's the nearest chocolate or the kitty cat or something. But we have to be positive. So in our evolutionary makeup, if you like, we are risk avoidant. We don't like hard conversations. We don't like messy decisions. That's who we are. And I suppose we develop personal biases about that. So any conversation about looking at threat and risk has to bring in the idea of, how do you see it? What's your bubble? What's your bias?
That's where we're going. The next thing is that we trust our own judgment. Yeah. We don't like to doubt ourselves. And sometimes we can actually border on overconfidence. We're swayed by our own self-interest. So we don't want to see what we don't want to see.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'd agree, Drew, that in your world, people actually just don't want to think about the possibility of having cancer or a divorce or
And it's interesting, when I first started out many years ago, we won't count the years, some people wouldn't say the word cancer, they'll say the C word. And I thought, what's the C word? Is that being rude or something? And they wouldn't say it because they thought, from their cultural background, saying something would attract something. And that was their management plan. Stick head in sand and don't say the C word, which I thought was really odd, because my attitude is about what can we manage? How do we manage? Is it a threat for us? But personal bias, my gosh, it gets in the way, doesn't it?
I've just got somebody trying to come in and I can't get the the Zoom thing back to let them in. I really need to have a second person on these.
Yeah, you're running a very exclusive club, Bronwyn, so we understand that, and that's nice. So, well, while you do that, I'll prattle on if you like.
Yeah, you go prattling. That's a good
Yeah,
idea.
one of the things I look at is a phrase called the statistical reality. And the reality is you can't run away from statistics. All you can do is manage them. Now, people say, well, damn lies and statistics, aren't they the same thing? Well, no, they're not, because I work at that part of the world where I'm looking at probability of under 1 in 10 of an event occurring. So if I can say of the barbecue with 10 friends, I can more or less guarantee one of them will have this issue, all of a sudden you'll realize, oh, this is actually medium and above. I need to think about it. So if I were to ask a question, what is the chance of being struck by lightning in Australia? I mean, it's possible. We all go outside. I've got the notes here, so I'm being very precise. The chance of being struck by lightning in Australia, now there's 100 people a year who are struck, is about 1 in 4 million. It's a reality, but is it your reality? I don't know. What's the chance of winning lotto? Ever thought of that one? I see people who think, well, it's a 30 million, I have to be in it. So the chance of winning lotto are 1 in, for New South Wales, 3,575,880. That is the chance of winning lotto. So I can push those things out far away to say their threat to me, or my vulnerability to winning lotto, sadly, is not overly high. But I work with life insurance, and we all have a 1 in 10 chance of passing away before we expect. If we come down, we have a 1 in 5 chance of being sick or injured and unable to work for at least 90 days in our life. We have a 1 in 3, 1 in 4 chance of having a serious medical injury. So I'm working with very small numbers. And the worst one is we all have a 1 in 20 chance of suffering a total and permanent disability that takes us out of work, takes us out of business. Now, people say, well, that sounds very, very remote, until I say this. I was the 1 in 20. I was person number 20 who suffered a throat tumor, had to have surgery, lost my legal career, lost all those things, was off work for 2 years, and I even lost the ability to talk properly. And people say now I'm making up for lost time, but that would be rude to say. But the reality is I am 1 in 20. So when I'm talking with people about what's the risk to your business, it's actually what's the risk to you as an individual first, because upon you, all things work. So I can go on for hours, but Bronwyn, have you let people in, or you?
No, I can't seem to do it. So
Bronwyn,
yeah?
if you stop share screen for a moment, that should actually give you the access. And
That's
feel
the
free
trouble. I
to
can't even get to the share screen.
Oh,
So yeah, that's what I was trying to do, and I can't even get to the share screen button. So
Bronwyn, you'd make one of those bouncers at a party look really, really good. Like you can't come in. There's no way.
yeah, exactly. Just let me. Oh, wait on.
Can you make Dixie or myself a co-host so that we could help you with that?
That's a good idea. Dixie, I'll make co-host.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Easy.
Power transfer.
Power transfer. It's okay. I trust her. I do trust her.
I'm feeling the energy. Okay.
Okay. So shall we continue?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
All good.
And Drew's actually just jumped the gun a bit there. Because when we're talking about these probabilities, we do rely on subject matter experts like Roger, like Drew. But not all experts are like them. Sometimes it's a, bit of intuition in estimating how likely it is. There's another really good book on risk that goes right into that. So we're possibly not doing that how likely thing all that well. And the next thing, of course, is the consequence. And that's what Drew has just been talking about. He was actually one of the 1 in 20. And I've been cyber hacked. A lot of these things, one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this subject is because I have been in that situation. I lost a brother. I know exactly how losing a family member can completely derail a business.
Yes.
So a lot of my what I'm telling you and what I write about and speak about is coming from my own personal experience. That's some more of Drew's statistics. Now you'll have these slides. Look through them and be appropriately frightened. I know I said I wasn't going to frighten you, but yeah, maybe you just need to be a little bit frightened. This isn't. Did you go through this one? This one is particularly interesting, Drew. Could you just quickly talk us through that, because we have lost a little bit of time?
One of the interesting things with people is that we think that if we just dilute the mix, we dilute the risk, and we go into business with other people. So we think, well, I'm in business with another person, so I've only got half the risk. So if we were to say the 1 in 20, well, wouldn't that become 1 in 40? And then we think, I'll have 3 business partners, and that's a third, like drinking weak cordial where you can't taste it anymore. It's so gone. And you think, I'm safe. But the reality is, it's the inverse. In fact, if you have 2 business partners, the numbers say the chance of one partner passing away before age 65 is around 3.5 out of 10, or 35 in 100. But if you make 3 business partners, the risk is just around 5 out of 10, or 47 per 100. But if you talk to one of my clients who's a 4-partner accountancy firm with 4 partners, they have a 57% chance in 100 that one of their team will pass away before 65. That is amazing when you think about it, because we don't like to think about it. So it sounds always so foreign until you've been part of something and you've seen it happen, and you say, yes, that happens. And if you jump to 6 partners, well, you have a more likely than not scenario. 77 out of 100. And then if you change the age range, you have someone who's 35, someone who's 45, someone who's 50. It's a not if, it's a when. So these are the things that I deal with, risks that are 1 in 20 or below, because this is what business relies upon. If you take out the management, or you take out the key person through one of these personal matters, the business will suffer. Now, I can go on for hours, but just look.
Yeah, we haven't got time today, Drew.
Yep. So just look at the idea that cordial, the more water you put in and you can't taste it, not the same with risk. Bronwyn, back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on in those novel risks, and this is where even the stuff that Drew's just been talking about. Why hasn't someone told me this before? Well, they may very well have, but maybe we've fallen into one of those little traps of, I don't really want to hear that, so my brain's just cutting it out. Null risks. These are the ones that are moved completely out of the blue. And they could be from, complex combinations of various things happening, and it's nearly always more than one cause. But we do need to put a little bit of extra effort in to try and find them. Now, this is where Drew and I are going to have a little bit of fun. Right. I never thought of that. Sometimes those novel risks aren't actually novel. We've just stopped ourselves from seeing them. And here's some odd ones that Drew and I have seen over the years. One I saw recently was a court case where a business landed in court because they'd sent an emoji in a text, and that was considered by the court to have been agreeing to a contract. So be careful about using emojis. Oprah Winfrey was paid to endorse the Microsoft Surface when it first came out. So she sent out this lovely tweet saying, Gotta love that Surface. I've bought 12 already for Christmas gifts. The trouble was she sent it out on an iPhone or an iPad. So kind of backfired a bit there. Alitalia Airlines. Somebody listed business class fares for $39 instead of $3,900. Cost the company, well, one, reputation, and B, $7 million. Drew, over to you.
Okay, one of the things that we are seeing in business is the unusual effect of long COVID. People who have long COVID are people who have symptoms that go past 90 days. And that has become a problem because people with long COVID are uninsurable. That changes because if you invest in a company with someone who has long COVID, is your investment at risk? That's a real odd thing. Long COVID. I have a surgeon now who has long COVID. There's a slight change in her thinking. She's deemed uninsurable because we don't know what's happening and there's a dementia risk and everything else. So long COVID is number one we're seeing. Number two,
Wow.
For men, prostate cancer recovery. They say that men might recover, but there's a cognitive decline of at least 30%. So if you're part of a team where you have guys, say 50 and over, and one or two might have exposure to prostate cancer, there's a reality that there's a risk that there may be a cognitive decline. So you can turn up for work, but the quality is no longer there. That's a risk that's very hard to manage. Another thing we're seeing is assets in partnerships that are what's called a general partnership, where one partner has a bad day at the office, takes the company checkbook, buys the Porsche, drives to Western Australia, gets all the tickets, pays for nothing, and the other business partner, because there's joint liability, is hit with a debt. So long COVID, it's out there, prostate cancer, and cross-secured assets in a business partnership. Things we can all fix if we think about it.
Here's another one. Somebody got some Indian outsourced developers to build their website. And a couple of weeks later, because it was a small business, a startup, so they didn't have much marketing budget, and they spent the whole lot on building this website. A couple of weeks later, a prospective client actually got in touch with them and said that the website would only accept Indian postcodes. So they, A, lost a lot of business, and B, spent all their marketing budget on a website that wasn't working. During World War II, you might have seen this in some of my promo material, the Allies assumed that Japanese pilots, because they have different shaped eyes, couldn't see properly, and therefore they would be no good at aerial combat. And that didn't happen to be so, as we know from the results of World War II. Another assumption, World War II, women can't do mechanic-y things or fly planes or do any of those things. So, of course, all the men were going off to war, and all of a sudden the productivity in agriculture and in general industry was declining and declining and declining to the point where it was affecting the war effort. So that assumption had to be reconsidered. At COVID-19, yes, it was unexpected, but we'd been warned about it for years by scientists and by Bill Gates. One of the classic disasters, which we all know about, is the Challenger disaster, when the Challenger spacecraft blew up just after liftoff. Now, engineers had raised concerns about that, but they were ignored, and established safety protocols were dismissed, resulting in an absolutely catastrophic failure. So there's just a couple of examples. One more. I had one of my clients yesterday turn up to a job, had all the gear, everything ready to go, and it's not just, he's not just turning up with an iPad and a pencil. He's got a trailer with all this stuff on it. Absolutely nobody knew anything. Everybody else, I thought somebody was going to tell you. I thought Joe was. I thought Bob was. So, A, my client has wasted an entire day. B, the company is going to have to pay him for that day and then get him to come back. So all of those things, if we look, they can all come down into a number of categories. And this is where we're heading, trying to give you a framework to look. Now, if we look at those ones that we just went through, landing in court because of your use of an emoji, which of those categories do you think that would fit into? I put it in technology, but it could come into, you know, a couple of others as well. Communication, certainly. These categories I've drawn from several sources. Some of them are my own. For instance, I put AI in a separate category, all of its own, because I believe it's going to be so disruptive. Not so much, you know, I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying it is a big thing that we need to be considering. Oprah Winfrey with her Microsoft Surface. Communication? Yeah. Oh, action? You know, maybe they should have actually given her a Microsoft Surface tablet to do the promo from. The Indian developer story with the website. I could actually put that in diversity, you know, because the person has drawn in an outside contractor, but not taken into account the potential ramifications of that. It could also be communication. Yeah,
and the bubble they're in, each supplier is in a bubble of their own.
Yes,
we need to be aware of that. Yeah.
What Drew has mentioned about recovery from, you know, progressive cognitive decline in people that recover from prostate cancer. You know, that could come into adaptability. It could come into timing. It could come into diversity. Whoops. I'm just scrolling down here. I'm trying to go through this a little bit quicker. The Japanese pilots firmly in bias, and the women working in the, you know, flying the airplanes in World War II, firmly in bias. So what biases are we carrying around in our dear little heads that's actually creating a problem for our business? PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, you all know what's been happening with that. No, Dixie. One of their partners, senior partners, was consulting to the government on tax minimisation for multinational companies, and at the same time selling that information to multinational companies. It's a bit of a no-no. So now they've landed in a whole heap of trouble, reputational and financial, because the narrative that they were putting out, as in, you know, big, trustworthy, you know, experts, was not in accord with what they were actually doing. So their narrative fell apart. Qantas, same thing at the moment, how to wreck one of the world's best brands. What they were telling us was not what was still happening behind the scenes. The warnings about a coming pandemic from scientists and you know, Bill Gates, where would that fall? Possibly action. They didn't actually do anything about it. Or perhaps even laziness. Just couldn't be bothered.
I think you could also argue communication. One of the things we say is that often there's a remoteness between the managers of a business and who they use to report on an issue. And at some point there is too remote because they've outsourced their thinking to a mission critical task or risk. And back to Bronwyn's point where they say, well, we've had someone do that for us, so we're good.
Yeah, we're all okay.
And then all we've done is shifted bubbles, really.
And then we can look at all the supply chain crashes during COVID. You know, the plane stopped, the ship stopped, the train stopped, everything stopped. So all of a sudden, all of these supply chains that had been that had been put together for efficiency, not risk, fell apart.
Mm.
So that's a structural issue. The structure of their supply chains meant that at the first hint of a global pandemic, they were destined to fail. And we could go on.
Mm.
Last one, the big one, leadership. None of those things are anything without leadership. So you, as a business owner or manager, have to be the person in the room twiddling all those dials of, you know, action and narrative and communication to keep the whole thing, the ship, ready to sail and with the ability to face some of these inevitable storms. And unfortunately, leadership, in spite of the amount of books on leadership, the amount of people who speak on leadership, who do workshops on leadership, we're still fairly short of good leadership. So where have we been? We looked at traditional risk management and had a little quick look at, you know, the good things and the limitations of traditional risk management. Again, I stress, we're not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We just want to look beyond it and realise that there are some limitations and we need to look at them. Secondly, we looked at those limitations and even, you know, what we could possibly do about them. Then we looked at novel risks, and some risks that we might call novel are actually not novel at all. We just haven't looked for them.
That's true.
Or which we've seen them and we choose not to see them. Remember those the biases, the Japanese pilots, the women mechanics. We just choose not to see them, or we choose to only see things that are in our self-interest. So Drew and I are going to leave you with a challenge today. By the end of the month, we would like you to uncover at least one threat, going through those categories, having a really solid think. You might want to sit down with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or have a chat with some of your team or somebody else. Uncover at least one threat, decide what category it's in, and then understand the outcome. And how do you measure that outcome, Drew?
That's a really easy one for me. The way I look at what's an active threat in my life is what is the financial impact of it occurring? So if the financial impact is something I can't sustain, I can't bear, that it would put me out of business or extinguish my brand, that's something I need to think through. So I suppose the idea is, how remote is this to you? If it's a person risk, it's normally an under 1 in 20 issue. If it's something which is pandemic, that's quite different. So I look at the idea of what is the cost outcome, put a cost on the outcome of something occurring, and then see how you relate to that. There's financial cost, there's emotional cost. The hardest things are those that link those together. Whenever you have emotion and finances linked, understand we always make really poor quality decisions, and we need to stop and get an outside viewpoint on, is this something that I'm not thinking about in the right way? So that's how I would measure it. What is the financial impact on you, and can you handle it?
Thanks, Drew. And while we have the opportunity to have Roger in the room, I'm going to flick across to Roger for a moment to tap into his expertise about how his specialty, which is cybersecurity, would fit into that framework that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, it does fit in. when we're talking to our clients, one of the things we do is we play a what if game, and that literally comes up with, this is a scenario. A, have you got the systems in place to be able to protect yourself against that scenario? And if you haven't, what do you need to put in place? And that way you can build up I suppose, a body of work around the risks that are associated in the cyberspace and work out how you're going to react to a situation. A large number of our organizations, when COVID did hit, we had a what if process in place of what if you couldn't get to work, okay? That was then turned into their COVID plan, okay? And literally along the lines of, okay, there's been a fire in the location in the suburb where your office is, nobody can get in and out for the next 3 days. How are you going to function? How are you going to work? How are you going to do what you need to do? Expand that answer to COVID, where nobody could bloody move at all. How are you going to function? How are you going to actually use it? So a lot of our clients had a base level to work with. So they knew that they had remote access to their systems. They knew that everybody needed that remote access to continue to work. They knew that the security was already in place because we'd set it up just in case they couldn't get into the office. All of those things literally came out of what if you couldn't get to your office. And it really is important if you look at the problems with risk in the digital and cyberspace, there are risks that people just don't understand it as a threat. And if they don't understand the threat, they don't see the vulnerabilities, and they're not going to do anything. And one of the other things that we tell all of our clients is we will do everything that we can to make sure that you are going to be secure, but the risk is still yours, okay? We will go out of our way to make sure that something won't happen, but you can't just say, well, that's their problem, because it's not. It's still your problem as a business. And we quite happily go through that with the client as well. So,
I've got a comment and a question. Roger, comment what you said about your fortunate clients having being prepared for what happened to us all during COVID. There's a lot of research in the UK that Brexit, because Brexit was built on untruths, which is, again, that narrative thing that comes up, which has cost UK businesses at least 3% of GDP. But the businesses that had plans in place, they had actually done this thorough thinking about the threats to their business. Even though this Brexit thing came along, those businesses have survived better. Yeah,
and it would have been a case of, okay, yeah, it's on the skyline, it's coming towards us. What are we going to do about it? And a lot of small and medium businesses and not-for-profit organisations don't actually think in that space. They think, oh, we're in our own little bubble, we're going to be able to survive. We're on the main street, that's all we need to worry about, until something does happen. And yeah, I was reading an article today, of all things, quantum computing, and everybody's been saying, oh, we won't see that for another 5 years, 10 years. They just broke RSA's 2048-bit encryption yesterday. Now, by doing that, they've just taken the whole of the security of the internet and put it on I suppose, an early warning signal that this is coming. Okay, your encryption processes that need to be in place now are not RSA; they have to be quantum encryption. And those are the type of things we have to start looking at significantly. AI is another one. We can see AI literally not so much on the horizon; it's right next to us right now. And if we don't address it properly, we're going to have what we have with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. We're going to have those sort of problems going forward. And it's my job to actually be ahead of this stuff and tell normal people that this is going to be something you're going to have to address. And those little scenarios that we run, that's all about what it is. Okay, just get you thinking outside the box. The box is where you work. The cyber criminals are outside it all the time. And we have to make sure that we've got the systems and the processes and the policies and procedures to make sure that they're not going to have an impact on the organisation as much as possible. And that comes down to analysing the risk, and working out how to defeat the risk or mitigate it.
Well, I've got a question now before I hand over to everyone else. And this was a hidden risk in my business. Now we'd done all the stuff about, you know, cybersecurity. We had all the, honestly, I have spent, I don't know, probably $1 million over the last, you know, X years on security and what I didn't know was that and given that I live in a regional area where I don't have a lot of access to, you know, people like Roger, the IT person that I had hired was a complete incompetent. And
yeah. It's one of the biggest problems we've got with not only the IT space, but definitely with the security space. IT is about nuts and bolts, okay? It's making sure the printer can print. It's making sure that you can connect to the internet to do whatever you need to do. Cybersecurity is all about risk. It's all about analyzing the risk to your organization and coming up with ways that you can defeat that risk as much as possible. So if you've got high and extreme risk to your organization, you might be using an old CRM, for instance. It's hosted internally. What happens if you get compromised? All of that data is now available to the bad guys. How are you going to stop it? Now, if you have to put security around that, then you may need to make decisions about, should we still be using that, or should we be using a cloud-based system? Or what is the best way of securing our information and data, our assets to the business in such a way that we are lowering the risk to that asset? And in our space, we are always talking about digital assets. If you don't know where your data is, you don't know who's got access to it, you don't know where it's stored, you don't know what can be done with it, you don't know what the people are doing with it, then you need to sit down and go, yes, we're in Amazon, yes, we're in OneDrive. Who has access to it? Can Microsoft gain access to it? Yes. Are they allowed to? No. But does that stop someone who's an insider from gaining access to your information? There was a big thing about 5 years ago where there was data being held in Evernote that was suddenly, and this was proprietary data, that started appearing on the internet in other spaces. And it was deemed that an insider had stolen all the information. Those are the risks you have to actually apply when you're using anything to come with digital. And a lot of people think, oh, yeah, it's easy, we don't have to worry about it. Security is built in. No, it's not. And that's, again, what this attitude, I suppose, that people have. Too small. We haven't got enough data. Who's going to attack us? We don't have that sort of impact. Okay, well, if you've got data of one other person on your system, then you've got a problem if you're not protecting it. And that's significant in itself.
I read somewhere, and this may or may not be true, that a lot of it was like the kindy hackers, you know, practice on small businesses before they graduate to the real stuff.
Script kiddies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dixie, I know you and I have had some conversations about risks to your business. Unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, it's been an interesting thing. About 2 years ago, and Roger was amazing helping me with this. I got hacked into my Apple account by someone who had actually unscrupulously, as it turned out, discovered my password and used it indiscriminately, and it was a landlord, as it happened. But anyway, so we had to secure that, and going through that was really quite informative. But it really highlighted just how incredibly vulnerable you are. And it doesn't matter how much great stuff you do and how switched on you think you are and how clever you think you are with your passwords. There are people out there who are just, you know, it's their business to do whatever they can to scuttle you. And I've just literally this week, and again, thinking I was so clever with, you know, good passwords based on Roger's good advice, been hacked. My Facebook account has been hacked. I have completely lost all access to Facebook Messenger. And for me, that's actually quite a big deal. But it's been so incredibly frustrating to try and get Facebook to assist with it that I'm actually ready to say, you know what, I'm done with Facebook. I'll just live without it. But again, it just reminds you of just how careful you have to be and how incredibly vulnerable you are. And even with things like AI, you know, when you think about contracts that you have with people.
That's what I was thinking about too with your business.
Yeah.
You know,
so
that your entire business model could be under threat.
Absolutely. You know, if you don't have things like in our contracts now going forward, we're putting simply that, you know, this is our level of operation with regards to AI. This is the way we will function with AI in our business, so that we've got that clearly stated, and that's based on information and advice we've had from legal. And if you don't do that, or if you cross the line and you accidentally put someone's, you know, intellectual property online and it turns up somewhere else, that's your reputation completely screwed. And so you have to also be really mindful of how do you manage the risk to your reputation, not just with AI, but, you know, sending a shitty email to someone, not sort of thinking through what you're saying and the importance of how you're articulating a problem. Those things, excuse me, those things can actually completely undermine in moments the hard work that you've done for many years in developing a good, strong reputation. So those are also risks that you have to weigh up and be secure about. And, you know, what your staff do or what your other stakeholders to your business do that might also impact on your reputation. So there's lots and lots of ways of looking at risk. I found this conversation to be absolutely brilliant today. Thank you.
I'd just like to pick up one. Sorry, go, Drew.
I was just going to say to one of Dixie's points, what really came through, Dixie, was you were saying without saying is you need a response plan. So
Yes.
part of managing risk is what is the financial cost should it happen, but also what's my response as to, do I use Roger's services? Who am I connected with? Have I thought it through in a scenario planning of some form? And it's really interesting and good to hear that you're thinking through having a response. It's not an if, but it's a when response. Sad, but very commercially sharp.
Well, I think too, you know, and Bronwyn runs an amazing service to help people identify what their areas of risk are. And the biggest component to managing risk well is to thinking through what risk is and how it might affect your business. So having the ability to sit down and really think that through is critical to any form of business risk management. And you know, going back, just one other thing, I was widowed very young, and so had to deal with, you know, how death disrupts the business, and observed what my late husband had done with regards to how his business was able to carry on very, very well, compared to mine having at the time being so completely derailed by just having to do, you know, extended weeks in hospital visiting time.
Yes.
Let alone all the repercussions after. You know, you think that if someone dies or if something suddenly happens or someone gets sick or whatever, oh, that's going to be a big disruption to your time in your life. But you don't always think about the simple things like if you suddenly have to take 2 or 3 hours out of your day every single day for several weeks at a time, just to be the support person for something that goes wrong for someone else. That is just as big, if not bigger, for some people than, you know, you getting sick for a couple of weeks yourself.
Yes.
And so, as Drew says, that you're then running into, so that business risk model that we looked at earlier, the traditional risk management model, as Drew said, it's built for businesses, not people. And it asks us to look at a financial cost. But as you've just rightly pointed out, Dixie, there is an emotional cost.
Absolutely. And an exhaustion.
Jo's also nodding her head. You need to read Jo's book.
The exhaustion factor, the emotional and mental and physical exhaustion factor when something scuttlebutts your business.
That's right.
Major. Yeah.
So even with those well-known risks, like fire, flood, whatever, we went through one flood. We really didn't get impacted that badly because we have an environmental consultancy. We knew when the water was coming and how we all packed everything up. So, but still, the emotional cost of going through that was real, and we hadn't even really been affected. It really does drain you, drain the business, drains everybody around you. This current slide, I think, is great, is wonderful. Now, I also picked up that up from General Stanley McChrystal. The greatest risk to our business is us, is ourselves. Those blind spots, the biases, the lack of communication, the bad structure, etc., etc., etc. We've already had quite a few questions, but I just want to ask one question, and Roger actually alluded to it. What if? We talk about the 5 whys when you're getting to the bottom of an issue. Why? Well, what about the 5 what ifs? For instance, in my cybersecurity incident, I did all the what ifs of what if somebody tries to hack and what if, etc. But what I didn't ask is, what if my cybersecurity advisor was a complete nincompoop, incompetent? Yep. I didn't go far enough with my what ifs. So that's the question I would like to leave, is what if? Anyone else got any other questions? Jo, do you have any other questions or things that you could add to the conversation?
Well, I was fascinated with what Drew shared. Thank you, about these extra risks around things like long COVID and prostate cancer, for example. I know somebody who has recently shut their business down due to long COVID.
Ooh, right.
So that's taking it to the extreme. So they had a magazine as a business,
Right.
and had it for about 10 years or so, and long COVID occurred, and she didn't have the mental capacity to do what needed to be done, and so the business basically shut down. Now, at the last minute, I believe somebody has purchased it as an online version, which is different to the paper version that's been going for 10 years. But something that you wouldn't even have thought of insuring against even 5 years ago.
Yes.
And it hadn't occurred to me that it was something that that was now a risk out there in the insurance industry.
Yeah.
Universe.
I guess it's a new question on the forms. I mean, I have a TPD policy, and I had a melanoma in 2020.
Right.
So I was grateful to draw on that policy, because yes, there were expenses around surgery, and apart from having to sit with my leg up for weeks and not moving.
We've hit time, people. Again, I'd like to respect your time. You've got other things to go and do in your day. Thank you so much, Drew and Roger, for sharing your expertise. Honestly, so valuable to small business owners. Even if we can just get one small business owner to think these issues through and take action, our morning will have been well spent.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. One of the things that we find is everybody in small business think they're indestructible. And
it's that optimism.
Yeah.
Overactive gene. It's in all of us. It's terrible.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, everybody, thank you. You will get the recording. You'll get a few little follow-up resources from Drew and from me. Thank you so much for joining in, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And we'll see you next quarter.
Okay.
Thank you.